Next item on the agenda is the evacuation procedure. We've got no members of the public, so I think the councillors and the officers know where they're going by now. Apologies for absence. It's look like I've got no apologies. What? Oh, sorry. Yes, apologies from Councillor Cullen. Disclosure of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Yeah. Agenda item 4, public participation. We've got no members of the public. I don't think I've got any questions. Agenda item 5, update report on human resources issues. The officer is Perry.
Thank you, Chair. Recommendation to the board is that the report is noted. There's nothing further for me to add to the report, but I'm happy to take questions if anyone's got any questions in any particular sections. I've had some questions from Councillor Stewart. Thank you very much for those. I can do a general response back to those questions now and then follow up with further information by email to the party, if that's okay. Everyone's happy with it? Just I will respond to Councillor Stewart's questions first, and then if anyone's got any further questions, happy to take those. So the first question was, is there a breakdown in terms of absence reason by the directorate? Have got that breakdown. And the question was, one would expect more physically demanding role environments of misuse with occurrences causing absence. So it'd be interesting to see this information. If you look on Appendix B, you've got the overall amount of absence per sickness reason. So in terms of the breakdown, I'll send that through by email. The key in this year on the report 24-25, the top 3 reasons for absence were mental ill health, musculoskeletal, and ear, nose, throat, mouth as reasons. In terms of to respond to that question, the mental ill health, the highest was within streetscape, the highest amount of days lost. So a third of that total, approximately a third of that total, was within the streetscape division. And in terms of musculoskeletal, it was both streetscape and housing division that had the highest amount of days lost due to those reasons. And actually approximately 50% or so of the overall total of days lost from musculoskeletal from the streetscape division. So just a comment I'd make on that in terms of the musculoskeletal incidents of absence, they're not necessarily directly related from work, that the work has caused that, for example, so that would be logged as an accident at work. But in terms of if somebody's got a bad back, for example, and they're a refuse loader, it might then not be fit to undertake their duties, and obviously then it might be harder to make reasonable adjustments and put any, phase return in place in terms of adjusted duties to facilitate a return to work. For example, if someone's working in an office and they've got a bad back, they might be able to accommodate that within their duties as opposed to a physical role. But I will send the full breakdown where it lists each division and then the days lost per division on each of those reasons. And I think we've shared that, I'll do that going forward, which I think will be really helpful to see that breakdown across the divisions. And the second question was, are there any counter correlations in relation to mental health absence in any sedentary positions? In short, I would say no across the board in terms of mental health issues when they come across the divisions. That may across the board in terms of manual roles, office-based roles. Just as an overview on mental health issues, in total, the number of occasions that related to mental health was 57 occasions. 2 of those occasions were 2 individuals with significant absence, which are referred to within the report later on. Out of all of those occasions, there's 6 that were work related, so primarily it's personal reasons, and that may be someone suffering from anxiety, depression, it might be relationship breakdowns, bereavements, etc. Personal reasons for stress that then have resulted in that mental health absence. In terms of the support that we offer for mental health, we've got mental health first aiders, we've got the counselling service that again is utilised, I would say, well across the council. I would say we are a very supportive, reasonable and supportive employer. We'll try and help where we can with with any mental health issues and signpost people to the appropriate support services. If it is work-related mental ill health, so work-related stress, for example, we've got processes in place in terms of stress risk assessment that we try and then determine the underlying reasons for that work-related stress, so we can then put control measures in place to deal with that. One of the next question was, is there any information related to uses of interims or agency staff? Again, as a brief overview now, I would say in terms of the amount of use and spend on interim agency staff, it's primarily used within housing direct works, housing maintenance, and streetscapes, so our refuse and recycling and our grounds and streets departments. They're the largest areas of use for agency staff. The next question was, is there any information related to the amount of cover provided by bank staff? Don't have the exact percentage of usage. It's primarily within leisure, but it's approximately, let's say, between 10 and 20%. So our bank staff are what we call, the terminology we use here is casual staff. So they're on a no obligation contract for us to provide work for them to undertake work. And they're used to cover for sickness and absence, annual leave, etc. So as I've just got some recent figures out, as at the end of June this year, we've got 189 casual workers. So they've got a casual contract to provide work, and the majority of those are in leisure. So only a handful across the rest of the council. So that may seem a lot, but in terms of casuals, if you might have 10 lifeguards, 10 swimming teachers, 10 duty officers, etc. So there's numerous roles across the leisure service that then you'd have a bank within each role that then you could call on for, can you cover this shift for a class or a lifeguard shift, etc. One of the questions was coming confirmation of non-payment of overtime. So no overtime payments are made unless a casual worker does work over 37 hours. So again, if someone's just covering for sickness at a class or what have you, then that wouldn't be applicable. If, on the other hand, for example, it was a duty officer was on leave for a week and they covered a week's worth of leave and did over 37 hours, they would be contractually entitled to overtime, same as anyone else. It's only after 37 hours. Another question was, what is our present level of subscription to external HR support networks, such as WME? So NWBC, so that's West Midlands Employers, it's a regional employer. So we are a shareholder authority and got good links with WME. So myself personally I've been at the council for far too many years. We've got good relationships with various colleagues at WME. They hold a fortnightly district and borough heads of HR meeting that I attend, and it's really useful. So yeah, we utilise WME as much as possible where we can. In addition to that, again, I've got various other professional networks with other local HR managers. We're part of Solihull and Coventry Training Consortium as well, which actually we use as part of West Midlands Coaching Pool, which is from WME, and we have joined as part of that consortium at present. And we also have various external information and advice. So we sign up to HR legally compliant subscription service called Expert HR Brightmind. They've just changed the name to Brightmind, but that's legally compliant LexisNexis subscription service, which actually is helpful for policies and templates, etc. So we have that for information, and obviously our CRPD membership. So myself and 2 HR officers, professionally qualified. So we have the CRPD membership, which we can utilise the information from there as well. And then the last question that Councillor Stewart asked was, what is the present take of our employee assistance programs for our counselling service, and asking to see if uptake services was by directorate in terms of if there was an over reliance or an under utilisation, if there's any difference in terms of use of service by the directorate. So again, I'll provide that information by email, but as a general response, I would say it is used across all divisions, and actually on average the percentage varies between 5 to 10-11% across the division. So it is it is well used, and I know that it is very well appreciated by employees. one of the key things, especially as well, the report refers to staff survey. People do really value the support from the council and the counselling support. Just as I'll slip it in there now. I was talking about the staff survey. You know, for example, it's 93% of respondents to the survey say that council's a good place to work. On this last year's results, and that always kind of sits around that level. So they were all, I think all of them, all the council stewards' questions, which I'll send that information over by email to distribute as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Kerry. Any more questions?
Chair, just on the sorry, just on the 3.12, the long-term sickness absence is being managed. I have to say, by the way, it's nice to see the totals coming down, but being managed by either getting the staff back to work or by exiting the organisation and going for retirement, dismissal or resignation. In terms of resignations, what percentage of resignations are down to ill health?
Ooh, I'd have to look into that and actually do the percentage, but as a off the top of my head, I would say it's very low. So, for example, majority of time when we're managing any ill health case, obviously, let's say if it's a long-term ill health case and we're unable to get the individual back to work, we'll be looking at all the options that might facilitate a return to work. So whether that's reduced hours, redeployment, rehabilitation, ill health retirement, and the majority of times resignation is quite rare, I would say. Obviously, termination of employment is, you know, is the last thing that we'd want to do. We'd have to look at all options first, and ultimately, if somebody was leaving due to ill health, it would be better for the individuals to be dismissed, and in terms of us paying the notice pay for that. So it is rare. Just out of those significant long-term absences that are referred to there, 13 people, 9 returned, 3 still absent, 1 has left the council. On that occasion, that was an individual who decided to resign from the council for their own personal reasons due to their ill health. But that's what they wanted to do prior to us progressing through the stages of the policy.
And on 4.1, it alludes to 40 new starters, 40 endings, including 10 retirement and 28 resignations. Kind of like wondering how they tie up with the first point that I made in terms of those resignations. And the only other point that I was just wanting to kind of ask, with the staff survey, is it common? Is it a good response rate to get 51%?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of general for surveys, they normally say sort of anything between a 30 to 60% response rate is good. That 51% is the highest that we've had. It's kind of, I've been trying to get increase year on year. So that equates to, we've got a head count of approximately 330 employees. So there was 169 that completed it in back end of last year, 24. So 51% is a good response rate. I would also note that a large proportion of that headcount is leisure staff, where we might have people that only work an hour or two, etc. Although generally, I would say the response rate, because I do look at the response rate for division, generally the response rate for leisure is quite good, because we have it as a Microsoft forms to complete. We've got a QR code, which we found that's been a lot more successful getting staff members at the leisure centres to complete by the QR code, and it to the form on your phone. We do paper copies as well. One thing I'd like to try and do is get more of the manual staff, so more staff from Streetscape, Sheepy Road Depot and Lower House Farm to get those. I'd like to try and increase the response rate for those.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. I did ask the question about 51%, and I believe it was 50 last year.
Yeah.
I also asked about the survey when I've seen that there was 47 questions. It seems a lot of questions. And I did ask Kelly, because as a councillor, as the chair, I've never seen the questionnaire. So she's going to send us a blank one out for us to have a look at. Councillor Jones and then Councillor Watson.
I think Ray was before me, actually.
Councillor Jarvis.
It's a very quick one. Is do we benchmark against any other similar councils?
In, for any particular areas, so whether it's sickness, whether it's disciplinary.
Yeah, just generally, do we benchmark?
Yeah, so we are part of, so with employers, they have a benchmark board in Phoenix. That's where all the councils can input their data, and then obviously the more people that input, the better. So you can benchmark. And part of my local networks with other heads of HR managers will get information from those as well. So
The follow-up to that is where do we sit within that?
so in sickness, off the top of my head in terms of that looking at year on year data, generally we have sat higher than some of the other boroughs of districts, but HR have been doing a lot of work, as referred to in the report, with briefing managers and helping managers understand what the process is, and then being proactive in managing their attendance absence cases. And it's been a year on year reduction, so I'd like to think that is working. So in terms of benchmarking, when I do the next year, I'd like to think we're
Just to follow up on that on one specific one. So if you look at loaders on the trucks, that say for example we are higher than Council X, it might be then that we need to look at the process of Council X. Is our process similar to, worse than, you know, and maybe adjust processes to address the differences.
yeah, no,
You know, it's
agree, useful point.
you know, it one could lead into another.
Definitely, yeah.
Councillor Jones.
My first question is very similar to Ray, actually. I was going to ask, in terms of staff turnover and in terms of the number of disciplinary stuff, how does that compare, not just with other councils, but with ourselves year on year? Is that normal? Yeah.
I'd have to find out the information on other councils. I wouldn't be able to answer that for you now. But in terms of year on year, the labour turnover, I would say, pretty much stays around that level. A few percentages up or down. There's not a great deal of difference in terms of the labour turnover, unless, for example, you know, if we stopped a service and there was a number of redundancies in terms of, let's say, we've got their turnover, but then we've got voluntary leavers. So somebody was dismissed or made redundant, they're not classed as a voluntary leaver. So if we had a closure of a service, that would change that. But generally speaking, year on year, it's around that level. Possibly 24, 25, I would say, looks a little bit higher than other years. So yeah, 10 to 13% or so. Also depends on, you know, one thing that I would say, you know, the number of resignations we get per year, probably saying stays quite consistently. One thing that might change it quite considerably sometimes is depending on how many retirements we get each year. So you can see in 24 to 25 there was 10 retirements, which is quite a lot. So that will affect it as well. In terms of disciplinary investigations, none of those obviously resulted in dismissal, so they don't really equate back to anything in the labour turnover. But 7 disciplinary investigations, it is quite high for the year compared to normal.
My other question, Chair, if you've got time for it, 3.1.5, where the council intends to review its occupational health provider. Now, I seem to remember that we had the same statement in last time we had this report. So I'm wrong about that, I'm sorry, but if I'm right, the question is, how often do we review it? When are we going to review it?
Yes, so no, you are absolutely correct. It was in there last time, and that is still my intention to review the occupational health provider. Unfortunately, as referred to in the report, in terms of the HR team being a small team and I had numerous leavers within the team and then starters to onboard, it was a capacity issue. But for me, in terms of, obviously I need to review and put a tender out for our occupational health provider. It's referred to in the report as well about some of the policy reviews updates that have been affected by that, but the intention, that is on the HR work plan for this, move into this financial year to 25-26.
Probably next time.
Application for bits there.
Councillor Watts.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Kind of follows on from Councillor Jarvis and Councillor James' comments around how we compare. So I'm looking at 3.1.4. Based on what you said, we've got about 330 employees. There's 33 employees who are currently being dealt with under the attendance management policy. 10% of our workforce is being dealt with under attendance management. How does that compare to others, or is it? I mean, it sounds high. It sounds really high. And so that was my first question. The second one was in 8.3. It talks about 54 of the reported employee accidents. There were 54, only 5 riddles. So that means 49 of them were outside of work.
Bear with me 1 second. What number was that, sir?
8.3.
3.
It says 54 reported employee accidents, but only 5 riddles.
Okay, so in answer to the first part of the question, to ask that specific kind of comparison to other authorities, I can do that. I don't have that information to see where we sit in terms of that 10% of the workforce. One point I would say on that is those numbers are people that we're managing through the council's policy and process. If somebody, let's say it's short-term absence, for example, if somebody starts hitting the triggers and we move them into the formal stages of the process, they will officially be on the process, but we'd expect then the absence levels to reduce, and we might maintain and keep them on that process for 12 months to show that it can show a sustained improvement.
This is just that you've had to go into
Yes.
get to that point that just seems a high proportion.
Yeah. No, I can ask that and find out the percentage on that. 8.3 then in terms of incident reports, they are employee accidents, stroke incidents. So for example, if you see where there's 2 medical on there, so that's an ill health medical issue, that would be logged as an incident. It's not an accident caused by work, but the 5 riddle ones they can be riddle reportable, depending on the nature of the injury, and also if a member of the public's taken away from, employees, ignore me on that one, can also be riddle reportable though if there's a member of the public accident, they're taken away treatment, but they are all work related.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Jarvis?
Please, if I may. It's one reading a bit, just a bit further and listening to what you're saying about retirements. Do we do any age profiling and succession planning? Because if you get one area that's got, I'll say, a high percentage of people that's going to retire within the next 12 months, what succession planning is done to overcome that maybe sudden shortage of people?
Yeah, so as part of the council's appraisal process, we ask people's future plans, and generally speaking, most employees will normally have a good indication of when they actually want to retire. So we do generally get that information in advance. So it'll be for the divisions to consider the succession planning. I know in a lot of sections within the divisions, it's a lot of ongoing kind of coaching and mentoring within the teams, that if then somebody retires, we can potentially fill it internally. We've had a few examples of that recently. Part of the council that is on the HR work plan this year for the council's workforce plan, to do a workforce plan where I would discuss with the divisions and formalise that into a workforce plan. At present, I would say, we're doing that in not to a workforce plan, a formal document, but we're doing that in terms of how we work HR as a support service with the divisions anyway, when we're looking at restructures and planning, what's required for the service, for the establishment, if there's any changes to the structure. So that might be whether it's a reduction or whether it's an increase and more resources required. So
Any more questions for Councillor Bates?
Thank you. To be fair, I think Councillor Stewart and a lot of the other councillors probably, I did have a lot of scribbles all over here, but I think you probably answered or asked the same question, so I'll skip through half of my scribbles. So just coming on to 3.1.4, the 33 staff, which was picked up by Councillor Watson as well. What are the triggers? What's the policy? What are the triggers for people to go on to performance?
So the-
performance.
Yeah, there's two parts, thank you, Councillor. There's two parts, short-term absence and long-term absence. So in terms of short-term absence triggers, it is, remember, 10 days plus in a period of 12 months. Repeated and regular absence, any pattern of absence, so if it's like regular Mondays, Fridays, etc. 3 times off in 2 months, and a Bradford factor score of 50 or more. So that's short-term absence triggers. Long-term is any absence over 20 working days, so a month or more in class, there's long-term absence. So where somebody's hitting short-term absence triggers, we've got formal reviews. So that's the 11 there, you've got management formal reviews. If it doesn't improve on formal review, it goes into case management part of the policy, which is stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3. So yeah, that's the short-term triggers. Long-term, not the same in the sense of trigger points, it's just anything over 20 working days.
So what do we do with employees before they get to, as they're approaching, what support via supervisions or what management support is being put in place?
Yeah, so
before those triggers kick in, before they become
more formal. Yeah,
more formal?
yeah. So we have effectively what we call an attendance conversation document with managers. So when HR are filling off the sickness reports, again, this is where we need managers to be proactive. That managers should be speaking to their employees before. But if we pull it off the reports and notice this person starting to have absence even before they start hitting the triggers, my HR officers will have a conversation with the manager to effectively raise that with the individual. 'Cause sometimes some individuals might not recognise that they've had the absence. You know, if one was how many months ago and then another one and then another one. Yeah, so we do have because a lot of times, whether it's attendance, management policy, disciplinary performance, a lot of times we can resolve matters informally by having a conversation and before we have to go down any formal process, depending on the nature of the issue.
Thank you. That sort of takes me to, I'll jump to 7.1 and we'll go back. What training, I mean, you talked about training in 7.1 for staff, but it doesn't say anything about management training. I understand obviously you've got HR officers and what have you, but you know, frontline managers dealing with staff on you know, operation and delivery. What training is put in regards to managers being able to support staff?
Yeah, so I think the corporate training plan that the council that when we have the training plan, we split it up into divisional training and corporate training plan that HR then manage the corporate training plan and put on the courses throughout the training year. Managers over the years, we've done managing difficult conversation training recently, not this year, I think the year before we did mental health awareness for managers with managing their staff. Trying to think out what else.
So is it not
we do.
mandatory sort of annually that managers receive that training as part of a training matrix schedule?
No,
Because
so it's
obviously you have quite a lot of turnover as well on the numbers. I'm assuming some of those are managers. So, you know, what's the training look like going around the trackings? How repetitive is that?
So normally with a reflection program, we'd probably want to do that on a 3-yearly basis. So for example, we have our e-learning modules, so whether that's health safety, customer service, equality, diversity, we do a refresher on a 3-year basis. In terms of any turnover or change, so if somebody became a manager and they weren't previously, that'd be addressed through the either appraisal process or what we call when we have a new staff into role, we either have a probationary period or an appointment support period. So that would be identified in that process in the sense of is there any additional training they need to be able to do their new role effectively.
just, I don't think it's quite important, I think, for managers to be trained and supported to manage their staff in a proactive rather than a reactive manner. So I just thought that was quite interesting. Sorry. The 28 resignations, I'm assuming we do exit interviews.
We do, yeah.
And what is that showing us? Is there anything that's showing us that we need to learn from?
I mean, one of the key things I would say in terms of resignations, sometimes that is a lot of depends where it comes from. So with leisure, obviously there's a lot more turnover in leisure. So again, if people are on a 5-hour, 10-hour week contract, they might be going to full-time employment. Pay is an issue, as opposed when what we pay for certain roles compared to other authorities. We have had people leave and go to similar roles, same roles with a different authority. I think on a benchmarking element, we are probably a lower paid out some of the local.
And that sort of feeds into your quality assurances and your annual staff questionnaires. What suggestions have come through from those? Is there anything that we, as a council, should be looking at to implement some of those suggestions, or anything we could be doing better?
I mean, yeah, overall, the responses are really quite positive, even when it is a negative or the direction of travel's gone worse, for example, than the previous year. But what we do with that is I take a report to management team, and then the divisions get their individual results as well, because there might be certain issues to address in the not only corporately but then divisionally as well. And one thing that we started last year is the staff forum to then discuss the staff survey results at the staff forum, where and look at some of the key areas. So management, communication, staff morale, to not only just get that quantitative data from the staff survey, and yes, there is comments in there as well, which is good. You get a bit of qualitative data from the staff survey in that regard as well. But the staff forum, it's more of a then focus group to feedback from that. And from last year staff forum and this year, so I say last year, talking 2023, and then we met in the staff forum in 24, and then the staff survey is always done at the end of the year. So the most recent staff survey, November, December time last year, we'll be discussing at the next staff forum, as mentioned there, July, August. There's always some things that we can probably do better in terms of communicating to different types of staff that we have, that we've done a lot of work on that with notice boards and making sure everyone gets, for example, the weekly email, and making sure office staff, depot workers, etc., get that same information. Management consistency across the organisation, which feeds into your good point about management training. Anything else in terms of, but we do get in terms of we will look at that and look at any key corporate issues that we need to.
And one last question, then I'll shut up on this. Do we have any incentives for good sickness records through PDRs, appraisals? What do we do to encourage and support good sickness levels and attendance records?
There is no incentive. We don't have anything per se in terms of any awards, whether that's financial or non-financial. There.
So it's not recognised through your annual appraisals, or
there's not a specific point on the annual appraisal for the manager to raise that in with the individual. Some managers may, some managers not. With that consistency there. I mean, ultimately, we're paid to got contract employment to attend, and generally a lot of people do. Not saying that illness is not.
yeah, but it just
is
doesn't.
allowed.
It also doesn't give a lot of value to those that do have really good sickness records. When we've got, to me, that is quite alarming, because albeit it might have come down slightly from last year, but I think there's quite a few scalps that need to be pulled off on some of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. And I think the point that you just brought up with the appraisals and that, I remember when we was on town council, and it was always the chair that done the appraisal. And that was one of the things that we brought up, was the attendance. And they got so many points for the good attendance. Well, not points, but if look. So I think that's a good point. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, just follow up quickly on that. So it's about making employees feel valued. Because one of the issues that can happen, particularly with attendance, is because obviously such matters are dealt with in a confidential framework with an individual concerned, but that can lead other members of staff who are sometimes having extra pressures put on them by attendance to feel that actually, just to have an acknowledgement in the appraisal to say, you know, that we know it has been noted. You know, it has been noted, because sometimes you can feel that yes, we are all paid to turn up anyway. But in actual fact, to do your job well and actually getting some kind of acknowledgement for it in whatever form. Is that we talk about exit interviews when I've done work in relation to building up there. Biggest reason for people leaving, actually, I don't generally think is pay. Yeah, it's feeling undervalued. That's when people start to look for their jobs. You know, the next job when they go and look for it, pay is important. Yeah, pay is important. That's why it's front and centre in the advert. But the reason why people start looking is not necessarily pay. It's normally feeling undervalued. And if they are aware of the councils, that might make them feel undervalued. But there you go. A couple of points to raise, mainly because of comments made by colleagues, the naughty kids in the background, is that if we are looking at an occupational health contract and a tender, I fully appreciate the pressures that are there. We won't be alone in that. So the possibility of actually putting together a tender for a framework agreement that other councils could buy into and might raise a few bob at the same time actually could be quite good. Otherwise, accessing a framework ourselves. The other thing, this is a little bit mischievous of me. I know, probably making a suggestion,
Like you.
but I have never seen at any council anywhere, and I've worked across a few and advised a few, where we've talked about surveys and processes, is that where there's ever been a survey of people who've undergone an attendance process and found out how they found it. Because invariably, the first words that are said in the attendance process is, this is a supportive process. Yeah. And the response that you will primarily get from people who sat opposite you, especially if you do things like the Bradford rating, when someone's come in, has gone off sick, dragged themselves out to attend a meeting on behalf of the council, then gone off again the next day because they feel so sodding awful, and have that counted as 2 separate periods of absence, which is then squared. And then you end up in the Bradford factory and go, this is a supportive process. And you think, don't feel like it. Yeah. I'd be really interested to find that out. And not just from here, but then when we talk about benchmarking from elsewhere, because there are 51 local authorities within the West Midlands, yeah, that will be having an attendance policy and process. One of them's probably going to be better than the others in terms of staff feeling that it is a supportive process. And I bet you there's probably half of them, at least, where the figure for a attendance process, not necessarily us, I just like to point that out, yeah, where it is, this does not feel at all like a supportive process. But I'm not aware of any council has ever done any kind of investigation as to almost like a customer satisfaction survey on attendance process. And if it is 10% of our staff who are undergoing it, and that's replicated across however many councils we've got within the West Midlands region and nationally, that's a lot of staff. That's an awful lot of staff that are undergoing this process. Probably far more than undergoing a lot of other processes that we pay a lot more attention to. So it'd be really, really interesting to find that out or to see if we're going to do it. I know it'll never happen, but I just think it's worth noting.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Peter.
Yeah, I think, can I just come back in on that? I think that was my point as well about what do we do proactively before we get to that, because it is about the health and well-being of our team, of our staff. You know, so what do we put in? There might be things available for them, but rather than get to that point of needing counselling, what do we offer as part of our package to staff to look after their health and their well-being? And that was my point as well about management training, making sure that they are trained to that level of giving really good regular monthly supervisions, where one of the mandatory agenda items is, how are you doing? You know.
Yeah.
So I'm probably sorry I shouldn't.
No, thank you very much for all councillors on I think it's been a really good meeting tonight, and it just shows that we do care about our staff. And I know this meeting tonight was only to be noted, so I will note it from the chair. But we'll have a word with Kerry how we can take any of these forward, whether we need to bring it back to another meeting, that we can bring it forward. But thank you very much, everybody. And as I say, from chair, I will note it. I'll go a second. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.